Ace Frehley. From the streets of the Bronx to the biggest stages in the world, Ace Frehley's journey wasn't just about music, it was about freedom, rebellion, and leaving a legacy that would never fade. The Spaceman's story is one of creativity, conflict, and an unforgettable mark on rock and roll. But what happens when the guitar falls silent? The world thought Ace was gone, but the music and his spirit still echo in the stars. The world thought the spaceman had conquered every fall. No one imagined this would be the final one. On the 16th of October 2025, news spread that Ace Frehley had passed away, and for a moment, it felt like the rock world stopped breathing. Morristown Hospital released a short statement confirming his death, and within minutes, the announcement spread across television, radio, and social media. Fans who had followed Ace for decades refused to believe it at first, hoping it was another false rumor. But this time, the news was real and final. Messages from shocked listeners, musicians, and old friends started to appear everywhere. Some wrote about how his music walked with them through childhood. Others said their first guitar dream began because of him. Radio stations across the United States changed their playlists for the rest of the day, playing his solos and classic tracks on repeat. Songs like Shock Me and New York Groove were suddenly heard again in homes, cars, bars, and record shops. But this time, the sound felt heavier and more emotional. Fans gathered in different cities, lighting candles and placing silver guitars and old vinyls on sidewalks. Some people showed up in spaceman-style face makeup, a simple way of saying thank you to the man who gave them a lifetime of unforgettable music. Social feeds filled with photos of Ace on stage, smiling with a guitar in his hand, lost in the music he loved more than anything. News channels replayed clips from old interviews, where Ace talked about his journey, his mistakes, his comeback, and his love for creating new sounds. Younger artists also joined the tribute, saying that his style shaped parts of modern rock without people even realizing it. To many musicians, Ace was more than a performer. He was proof that you could be different, loud, imperfect, and still touch millions of hearts around the world. His death was not just the end of a life, but the closing of a chapter in rock history. People did not mourn only because a guitarist had passed away. They mourned because a part of their own memories was gone with him. For many fans, Ace was connected to their youth, their friends, their first concerts, and their happiest nights with loud music and no worries. The world understood that this was not just the loss of a musician. This was the end of an era that would never come again. But to understand why millions mourned him, we must go back to where the legend was born. Some legends don't start on a stage. They start in a crowded apartment and a broken mirror. Long before Ace Frehley became known to the world as the Spaceman, he was just a kid running through the loud streets of the Bronx. He was born into a working-class family that struggled like many others in the area. Money was tight, but there was love at home, and his parents tried their best to guide their children in the right direction. The Bronx in those days was not an easy place to grow up. There were fights on the corners, noise from passing cars, and kids who learned too early how to survive on their own. Ace, whose real name was Paul Daniel Frehley, spent most of his time outside, where he learned confidence, quick thinking, and a tough attitude that would later become useful in the music world. Inside that small home, there was another world waiting for him. His family encouraged music and creativity, and he heard songs from different styles playing around the house. Ace felt a connection to music even before he understood it. He would stare at guitars in shop windows, wishing he could touch one. When a relative finally let him borrow a guitar, everything changed. The instrument was old and scratched, and the mirror he practiced in front of was cracked. But that did not matter. Ace spent hours trying to copy chords and shapes, learning by ear because formal lessons were too expensive. Even at a young age, he showed signs of a natural musician. His hands moved fast, and he learned patterns without needing much explanation. When Ace discovered bands like the Rolling Stones, something clicked in his mind. He listened to Keith Richards and tried to copy his tone, rhythm, and attitude. The roughness and confidence of early rock and roll felt like it belonged in his veins. Soon after, he discovered Jimi Hendrix, and that changed everything again. Hendrix did not just play the guitar. He controlled it, bent it, and made it scream. Ace played those records over and over, trying to capture even a small piece of that magic. Music became more than a hobby. It became a world where he felt powerful, understood, and free. At school, Ace was not a perfect student. He had a rebellious streak, often ignoring rules and getting into fights. Teachers saw him as distracted and unfocused, but they could not see what was happening in his mind. He was dreaming about sound, volume, and stages. His personality was bold and sometimes impulsive, but that same energy gave him confidence to perform, experiment, and take risks. When other kids talked about normal careers, Ace only thought about guitars, bands, lights, and crowds. His parents worried, but they also understood that music gave him a purpose that nothing else could. By his teenage years, Ace was fully obsessed with playing. He practiced until his fingers hurt, then he practiced more. He played in small local groups, slowly learning how to perform in front of people. Even when the crowds were tiny, he gave everything he had. Friends remember him as someone who could be wild one moment and completely focused the next. He joked, laughed, and lived fast. But when he picked up a guitar, the room changed. His talent was real, and people could feel it. The Bronx shaped Ace in many ways. It gave him toughness, ambition, and a love for loud, unapologetic expression. But it also made him hungry for something bigger than his neighborhood. He wanted stages, speakers, and a chance to prove himself beyond the blocks he grew up on. By the time he reached the end of his teenage years, he was ready to chase a dream that felt impossible. But he did not care. He knew what he wanted, and he was willing to risk everything for it. He did not have fame, money, or a plan, but he had a guitar, a fearless spirit, and a desire to be heard. He didn't know it yet, but destiny was waiting in Manhattan, dressed in black leather and breathing fire, 3 strangers, 1 room, no money, no plan, just volume. That is what it felt like the first time Ace Frehley stood in front of Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. By this time, Ace was looking for a serious band, not just weekend players. He wanted people who were hungry like him, people who wanted to go further than local bars and school gyms. When he saw an ad in a newspaper asking for a lead guitarist, he decided to show up, bringing his guitar and a strong belief in himself, even though he had no idea who was waiting behind the door. The audition took place in a small, simple room in Manhattan. Gene and Paul were already there, along with the band's first drummer. They watched Ace walk in wearing 2 different colored sneakers, something that made them laugh at first, but their smiles disappeared when he started playing. Ace plugged in his guitar, turned up the volume, and began to play with a sound that immediately caught their attention. His tone was raw, loud, and full of attitude. He did not try to impress them with fancy tricks. He just played from the heart, and within minutes, the room felt different. Gene and Paul realized that this was not just another guitar player. There was something unique about him. The chemistry in that room was instant. Ace liked their ideas about building something bigger than a normal rock group, and Gene and Paul liked that Ace had a sound that could fill any stage. They all wanted the same thing: success, power, and a music career that would take them far beyond New York. At that time, none of them had money, and none of them had real fame. But what they had was a shared hunger, and that hunger pulled them together. They decided to start working as a band, focusing on original music instead of copying what other groups were doing. Very quickly, the concept of something larger than life began to form. Gene and Paul believed that a band should not only sound good, but also look unforgettable. They talked about bold costumes, strong characters, and a show that would be impossible to ignore. Rock music was full of bands, but they wanted to create an experience. Ace agreed, but he still wanted freedom in his playing. The early meetings were filled with ideas that seemed wild for that time, but those ideas would soon change rock history. Late-night rehearsals, long conversations, and endless planning slowly shaped the foundation of what would become KISS. They imagined a stage show with explosions, lights, and fire. They imagined characters with identities that fans would never forget. Each member would be more than a musician, they would be symbols. With every rehearsal, the vision became clearer. The group now had direction, purpose, and a goal that went far beyond being just another rock band. Ace fit into this vision in a natural way. His personality, attitude, and guitar style brought the missing piece Gene and Paul had been searching for. They had found their lead guitarist, and he had found the partners who could match his drive. The band did not have fame yet, but something powerful had started. No one in that room could have predicted how far it would go, or how deeply it would change their lives. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same after that audition. No one knew it yet, but the spaceman was about to land. A mask can hide the face, but it can also unleash the soul. When Ace Frehley joined the band that would soon be known as KISS, he was not thinking about becoming a character. He only wanted to play guitar and create music that was louder, heavier, and more exciting than anything on the radio. But Gene and Paul believed that sound alone was not enough. They wanted a band that looked as unforgettable as it sounded. So, the idea of using makeup and characters slowly began to take shape. At first it felt strange, but Ace understood that if they wanted to stand out, they needed something bold. Each member had to choose a face and a symbol. Gene became the demon, Paul became the star child, and Peter took on the cat. Ace did not want something ordinary. He wanted a character that matched his personality, one that showed mystery and imagination. After thinking about space, freedom, and the unknown, he created the Spaceman. The silver colors, sharp lines, and cosmic theme fit him perfectly. The character was not just makeup to hide behind. It became a symbol of Ace's inner world, a place where he could be louder, braver, and more experimental than he ever was off stage. When he looked in the mirror with the makeup on, he felt different, almost like a superhero version of himself. Once the image was set, the band hit the road. Their early tours were intense, with long drives, low pay, and tiny hotel rooms, but they were motivated by ambition. The hunger inside each of them was bigger than the struggles they faced. They played wherever they could, sometimes to small crowds that didn't yet understand what KISS was trying to be. But even in those early shows, the Spaceman stood out. Ace's solos were powerful and unpredictable, and fans who saw them live never forgot the experience. The 1,970 seconds rock scene was wild and uncontrolled, and KISS fit right into that world. Audiences wanted louder music, bigger shows, and more energy, and the band delivered all of it. The makeup made people curious, the characters made them memorable, and the music made them real. Ace, as the Spaceman, became the spark on stage, moving with confidence and playing with a sound that cut through the noise. He did not talk much on stage, but his guitar spoke for him. Life on the road was not easy. The schedule was demanding, and the band was still trying to prove themselves. They performed night after night, sometimes without enough sleep or proper equipment. But the struggles only made them work harder. They were on a mission to break through, and slowly, they began to see results. Fans started showing up in makeup. People copied Ace's look, his silver boots, and his space design. The character that was once just an idea had become a recognizable symbol. It gave Ace confidence, and also gave fans someone to connect with. Behind the scenes, the life of a young rock band in the 1,970 seconds was chaotic. There were long rehearsals, loud after-parties, and a growing sense that they were part of something big. The world of rock at that time had few rules, and KISS pushed every limit they could. For Ace, the stage became his home. The spaceman persona helped him express every part of himself that he could not express in normal life. The band was gaining speed, and Ace's guitar became the heart of their live shows. But the most defining moment of his stage identity had not happened yet. The spaceman was about to take the spotlight in a way no fan had ever seen. Soon, the guitar wouldn't just sing, it would explode. Pain, electricity, and genius. Sometimes a hit is born from a near death. Ace Frehley's most famous moment did not start in a studio or during a calm writing session. It began on stage, in front of a loud crowd, when the pressure, sweat, and chaos of rock and roll mixed with a dangerous accident. During a live show in the 1,970 seconds, Ace stepped on a metal rail while holding his guitar, and a surge of electricity shot through his body. The shock was so strong that it knocked him backward and left him unable to move properly for a few moments. The audience cheered, thinking it was part of the act, but Ace knew it was real and could have killed him. After the show, as the pain ran through his arm and leg, the moment stayed in his mind. Instead of letting fear control him, he turned the experience into inspiration. That incident became the seed for the song "Shock Me." Ace wanted to turn a frightening memory into something powerful, something that showed courage instead of weakness. It became the first KISS song where he sang lead vocals, and it showed the world a new side of him. The lyrics were simple, but the feeling behind them was raw and honest, giving fans a closer look at Ace's personality. When the song was released, it quickly became a favorite. Fans connected with it not only because of the sound, but because they felt the story inside it. As the band continued to grow, Ace took his stage presence to another level. Fire, smoke, and volume became tools in his hands. While Gene had the demon persona and Paul worked the crowd, Ace became the visual and sonic center of the storm. He created guitar sounds that were heavy, sharp, and full of life. His solos became moments people waited for, and he developed tricks that made the audience go wild. The smoking guitar, the glowing lights on the fretboard, and the sudden bursts of sound all became a part of his identity. When Ace stepped forward for a solo, the arena shifted its attention to him. He didn't need to speak, because the guitar said everything. On stage, Ace looked fearless. The spaceman character gave him confidence, and the fans gave him energy. Every show became larger, louder, and more intense. KISS was no longer just a band, they were an experience. People came not only to listen, but to see a spectacle they could not find anywhere else. Ace played a huge role in building that reputation. The band's live performances grew into massive productions, with flames, platforms, flashing lights, and special effects timed to Ace's moments. His guitar became a symbol of the show itself. When it smoked or shot sparks, the crowd reacted with excitement, and Ace fed off that reaction night after night. The success of "Shock Me" and the growth of KISS's live power pushed Ace into the spotlight more than ever. He became a hero to young guitar players, especially those who loved raw and expressive rock. His playing style was not about perfection, it was about emotion, feeling, and instinct. That made him relatable to fans and inspiring to musicians who wanted to break rules instead of follow them. Ace was never the polished type, and people loved him for that. He played from the heart, and the audience could feel it. But with rising fame came rising pressure. KISS was becoming a global sensation, and the world expected more from them every year. Bigger stages, bigger shows, bigger risks. The speed of their success left little time to breathe, and the constant push for higher impact began to take a toll behind the scenes. Ace was still shining on stage, but life offstage was becoming more complicated, and the weight of fame would soon test the unity of the band. For the moment, he was unstoppable. A guitar in one hand, a crowd in the other, and a sky full of dreams above him. But even meteors burn brightest before they break. Success can unite a band, but ego will test its foundation. As KISS rose to global fame, the world viewed them as unstoppable. Stadiums filled, records sold in huge numbers, and fans in makeup lined up hours before every show. The group had gone from small clubs to giant stages, with massive lights, fire, and effects that shocked audiences in every country they visited. Each tour became bigger than the last, and their schedule left almost no room to rest. They would finish one show, travel through the night, and wake up in a new city with cameras, promoters, and crowds waiting. The excitement was real, but so was the exhaustion. The louder the cheers became, the more pressure built behind the curtain. The non-stop touring created a lifestyle that pushed everyone to their limits. There were long flights, cramped buses, and hotel rooms that never felt like home. Interviews, sound checks, rehearsals, and meet and greets filled their days, and the nights belonged to the stage. KISS had become a machine designed to entertain at the highest level, and every member had to keep up with it. Ace loved the stage, but the lifestyle around it began to wear him down. What once felt like a dream now came with rules, schedules, and expectations that left little space for freedom. With success also came a new challenge: the direction of the band. Ace wanted more musical creativity and room to experiment with new sounds, but Gene and Paul were thinking about the bigger business. They wanted to expand the KISS brand: more albums, more merchandise, more plans that stretched beyond the music. Ace believed the heart of the band was in the songs and the guitar, while Gene and Paul focused on strategy, image, and control. This difference in priorities slowly created a gap between them. What started as small disagreements turned into regular arguments about recording choices, set lists, and the band's future. The creative clashes affected how they worked in the studio. Sometimes Ace felt that his ideas were being pushed aside or changed to fit a direction he didn't fully support. He wanted songs that felt raw and real, while others wanted something polished and more commercial. The more he pushed for musical freedom, the more resistance he felt. Even though the band was winning on the outside, there were moments when Ace felt trapped. On the inside, KISS was becoming bigger than any individual, and that made him feel like his voice mattered less than before. Despite the growing tension, the band continued to deliver huge shows and hit records because on stage they still worked as a unit. When the lights went up and the crowd roared, the four members moved together with perfect timing. The fans saw only the power and the magic, not the disagreements waiting off stage. The makeup had become both a symbol and a shield. It created legends, but it also hid the reality each member was facing. For Ace, the spaceman mask was beginning to feel heavy. As the band expanded, the business side grew even more demanding. Meetings, contracts, planning, and branding took up time that Ace would have preferred to spend playing and writing. He respected success, but he did not want to lose the spirit that made them special in the first place. The more KISS became a business empire, the more Ace missed the hunger and honesty of their early days. On stage, the world saw stadium gods. Off stage, differences were slowly cutting into the foundation. The cheers of millions could not fix the growing distance between the members. The success that united them was now testing them in ways none of them expected. Behind the makeup, the fractures deepened. The only thing louder than the crowd was the silence backstage. As KISS kept growing, Ace Frehley began to feel more disconnected from the band he helped build. On stage, the screams of fans made it look like everything was perfect, but once the lights went down, the atmosphere changed. Ace felt alone in a group that now seemed driven by schedules, rules, and business decisions. The KISS machine was moving fast, and he no longer felt in control of his own place inside it. Every day brought new plans, new deadlines, and new pressures, and the freedom he once loved in music was slowly slipping away. The distance between Ace and the others became clearer during recordings and meetings. He would walk into the studio with ideas, only to leave feeling unheard. He wanted the music to come from emotion and instinct, the same way it did when they first started. But the band had turned into a brand, and brands had to follow structure, not impulse. It made Ace feel like a guest in his own music. The more the business grew, the more Ace felt trapped by it. He began missing rehearsals, avoiding discussions, and shutting down emotionally because he no longer wanted to argue. Touring made things even harder. Night after night, they played the same routines, repeating the same show with the same effects. Fans still loved every moment, but Ace felt the excitement fading from inside him. What once felt like adventure now felt like acting. The spaceman makeup, which once gave him confidence, now felt like a costume he couldn't take off. Offstage, everyone went their separate ways, and the silence between Ace and the others became heavier. There were fewer laughs, fewer real conversations, and more unspoken frustration. Ace's personal struggles also got worse during this time. The pressure of fame, long tours, and constant conflict pushed him toward habits that only deepened the divide. Instead of helping, some people around him encouraged the chaos, and he began slipping into a lifestyle that damaged his focus and health. While the band looked unstoppable on the outside, Ace was fighting his own battles behind closed doors. The louder the world cheered, the more he felt himself fall inward. Eventually, the situation reached a point where staying no longer felt possible. Ace realized he was losing himself, and the dream he once loved had turned into something that made him unhappy. He did not leave with a dramatic announcement or a grand speech. Instead, it happened slowly, over time, as he pulled back more and more until his exit became unavoidable. In 1982, after the release of music from The Elder and growing disagreements about the band's future, Ace decided to step away from KISS for the first time. Leaving was painful, but it also brought relief. Ace walked away from the machine that had taken over his life, hoping to find peace and reconnect with the music on his own terms. Fans were shocked, and many could not imagine KISS without the spaceman. But Ace believed he had no choice. If he stayed, he feared he would lose himself completely. He chose freedom over fame, even though freedom came with its own risks. When the news became public, the rock world reacted with disbelief, and many wondered what would happen next. KISS continued without him, while Ace prepared to start again from zero. He had talent, experience, and a loyal fan base, but the future was uncertain. He had stepped away from the biggest stage in the world, and now he had to face life without the shield of KISS. The question was simple, but heavy. Once you've flown through galaxies, can you survive gravity? Without the mask, he could finally breathe until the air turned thin again. After leaving KISS, Ace Frehley stepped into a world where he no longer had to follow rules, schedules, or creative limits. For the first time in years, he woke up without pressure from managers or band meetings. He could pick up his guitar whenever he wanted, experiment with new sounds, and rebuild his identity on his own terms. There was no demon, no star child, no cat, just Ace and his music. The freedom felt refreshing, and it reminded him of the early days in the Bronx, when playing guitar was about emotion, not deadlines or branding. Ace formed his own project, Ace Frehley's Comet, and began writing with a renewed sense of purpose. He wanted to prove that he was more than just a former member of a famous band. He wanted to show that his ideas, style, and stage presence could stand on their own. In the studio, Ace rediscovered the joy of experimenting with tones, riffs, and effects, without anyone telling him to change or simplify. His creativity flowed in a way it hadn't for years. The sound was raw, energetic, and honest, exactly the kind of rock he loved. During this period, Ace achieved one of the biggest highlights of his solo career with New York Groove. The song became a major hit and reminded the world of his talent. It had a catchy groove, a unique vibe, and Ace's personality all over it. Fans embraced it, radio stations played it non-stop, and the success proved that his future did not depend on KISS. New York groove gave him a new identity in the public eye, a solo artist who could create hits on his own. The song became an anthem, especially for fans in New York who felt connected to Ace's roots and attitude. The positive response boosted Ace's confidence. He toured with his new band, met fans who supported him even after the separation, and began building a legacy separate from KISS. People came to shows not to watch a former spaceman, but to see Ace Frehley, the guitarist, the songwriter, the performer. These were important years for Ace because they showed him that his talent still mattered in a world filled with new trends and new bands. He wasn't just surviving, he was rising again. But the path was not completely smooth. Life outside KISS also came with challenges. The support system he once had was gone, and the responsibility for every decision now fell on his shoulders. There were financial risks, lineup changes, and personal struggles that made the journey difficult. Without the structure of a big organization behind him, Ace sometimes felt the pressure more sharply. Success felt good, but independence demanded energy, discipline, and stability, things that weren't always easy for him. Still, Ace pushed forward because the stage continued to give him strength. Playing live kept him connected to his purpose, and hearing fans sing his songs reminded him that he had made the right choice. Even when problems appeared, the music carried him. Ace Frehley's Comet may not have reached the massive commercial level of KISS, but it gave him something even more valuable: creative control, personal pride, and proof that he could shine without a mask. Just when Ace was settling into his new path, and it seemed like he had finally found balance, something unexpected appeared on the horizon. An idea was forming, discussions were happening, and whispers in the rock world suggested that the unthinkable might happen. Then came an offer that would change everything again. The world had moved on, but it still wanted the original four. Years after Ace Frehley left KISS, the music scene had changed, new bands had risen, and the industry looked different. But one thing had not faded: the longing fans still had for the classic lineup. People who grew up with KISS never stopped talking about the magic of the original members. They missed the makeup, the characters, and the wild energy that only those four could create together. That nostalgia grew stronger each year, and it eventually led to conversations that many believed would never happen. The idea of a reunion slowly became real. When Ace agreed to return, the announcement shook the rock world. Fans who had waited more than a decade were suddenly given back a piece of their youth. The reunion tour became one of the biggest events in rock history. Tickets sold out quickly, merch sales exploded, and old albums climbed the charts again. Night after night, arenas filled with people wearing silver, black, and white makeup faces, painted like the Spaceman, the Demon, the Star Child, and the Cat. The reaction proved that time had only made the legend stronger. The world wanted nostalgia, and Ace was a central part of that memory. The first shows were emotional. When the original four stepped onto the stage together again, the crowd roared in a way that even the band members had never forgotten. The flames, the costumes, the smoke, and the volume reminded everyone of what made KISS special in the first place. Ace played with passion, and the Spaceman was back in full force. Old fans cried, young fans screamed, and the tour shattered records as it traveled across countries. It became one of the highest-grossing reunion tours of its time. For a while, it felt like the impossible had been fixed. But behind the success, old problems began to return. The same differences that once separated them started to surface again. There were business disagreements, personality clashes, and lifestyle conflicts that made working together difficult. Ace still cared about creativity and music, while others focused heavily on the brand and its expanding empire. What was exciting on stage felt tense backstage. The joy of reunion slowly turned into the same frustration Ace once tried to escape. The pressure of the tour schedule, along with the expectations placed on the reunited lineup, brought stress that grew with each passing month. Fame had reunited them, but it could not change who they were as people. The same chemistry that made them powerful on stage also made them explosive off it. Even though the music was strong, the relationships were fragile, and cracks began to show once more. Ace enjoyed the connection with fans and loved performing, but he began to feel trapped again. The cycle he thought he had left behind was repeating itself. The heavy routines, the disagreements, and the lack of creative space made him question his place in the group. It became clear that the reunion, although successful, could not heal everything. In the early 2000s, after another run of massive shows, Ace made the same choice he had made years earlier. He walked away from the band, the machine, and the pressure that came with it. KISS continued without him, and Ace returned to his own path. History repeated itself, and Ace walked away once more. He wasn't done until fate decided it was. After his second exit from KISS, Ace Frehley focused on living life at his own pace. He continued touring, recording, and meeting fans who still saw him as their spaceman. Even without the band that made him famous, Ace never lost his connection to music. He played smaller venues, worked with younger musicians, and continued improving his sound. The crowds were not as massive as stadium days, but they were loyal, loud, and filled with people who truly cared about his journey. Ace enjoyed the freedom to record what he wanted, and this period allowed him to reflect on everything he had lived through. As the years passed, Ace began working on what he believed would be his most personal project. He called it Beyond the Lights, a title that held deep meaning for him. He wanted the album to show who he really was, not the makeup, not the character, but the man and the musician. The songs were about his life, his struggles, his victories, and the lessons he had learned. In the studio, Ace worked with focus and excitement, experimenting with tones the same way he did when he was young. For him, the project was more than another record. It was a final statement, a gift to the fans who stayed with him through every high and low. The recording process reminded Ace of his early days, but this time he brought wisdom, gained from decades of experience. He talked in interviews about how much this album meant to him and said he wanted it to be something listeners would remember long after he was gone. His team noticed that Ace was working with unusual intensity. He would stay in the studio for long hours, adjusting guitar tracks over and over until the sound matched the feeling he imagined. The project was nearly finished, and Ace believed it would stand proudly next to his best work. Then came the day that changed everything. During a late studio session, Ace suffered a fall that resulted in a serious injury. At first, it did not seem life-threatening, but complications from the fall led to a brain hemorrhage. He was rushed to the hospital, and the music world waited for updates, hoping he would recover and return to finish the album. His last recording session, still saved on the studio hard drive, captured him laughing, testing solos, and talking about plans for the release. No one in the room that night imagined those sounds would be his final moments in the studio. Doctors tried to control the damage, but Ace's condition grew worse. His family and close friends stayed by his side, praying for a miracle that never came. The fans, unaware of the full situation, continued to message support online, expecting good news. But after days of uncertainty, the hospital confirmed what everyone feared. Ace Frehley had passed away, leaving his final project unfinished. The music world reacted with shock and sadness. People who grew up with his songs suddenly felt a piece of their past break away. For musicians, it was the loss of a pioneer who inspired them to pick up the guitar in the first place. The studio where Ace recorded Beyond the Lights became quiet. His guitar sat on its stand, cables still connected, as if waiting for him to return. The team later said that most of the project was complete, and fans hoped the music would someday be released. Ace had been close to finishing what he considered the strongest work of his later years. His journey, filled with fire, rebellion, mistakes, victories, and unforgettable music, had reached its final chapter. He was gone, and the world felt the silence. And then, the music stopped. Even in silence, the guitar still echoes. Ace Frehley's funeral was not just a goodbye to a musician, it was the closing of a chapter in rock history. When word spread that Ace had passed away, fans and friends around the world came together to mourn the loss of someone who had inspired generations. The news brought rockers, music lovers, and even casual fans to reflect on Ace's impact, how his sound, his energy, and his spirit helped shape an era of music that would never be forgotten. The funeral was a private affair, attended by family, close friends, and former bandmates. But despite the private setting, the world watched, knowing that they were saying goodbye to someone who had been more than just a member of KISS. Gene Simmons stepped up to the podium at the memorial service, his voice calm but heavy with emotion. In front of an audience that included the rock elite and loyal fans, he gave a eulogy that captured the heart of what Ace Frehley was. Gene spoke about their journey together, about the music they created, and about the man behind the spaceman persona. He talked about Ace's passion for music, his personality, and his unrelenting desire to push boundaries. Ace was the first person to make a guitar in his hand laugh and cry, Gene said, his words hitting deep. There was no avoiding the truth. Ace had changed the course of rock history, and his absence left an irreplaceable void. Paul Stanley, always the optimist and the one who could rally the group, spoke next. His tribute was more personal, filled with reflections on the struggles, the successes, and the moments they shared. Paul talked about how, despite their differences and personal struggles, music kept them in the same world. He mentioned how, despite everything, they always came back together when the music was needed. "We were different, but music kept us in the same world," Paul said, his voice cracking slightly. In that moment, you could feel the weight of years of tension, but also the undeniable bond they had shared as brothers in arms. It was a tribute that captured not just the loss of a bandmate, but of a friend. Outside, fans gathered in the streets, many of them dressed in KISS makeup, holding candles, and playing Ace's songs on guitars. They stood in silent tribute, unable to express in words the loss they felt. The phrase "Goodbye, Spaceman" quickly went viral, not just online but in second, real life. It appeared on banners, social media posts, and in the hearts of fans around the world. It was simple, direct, and filled with love. Ace Frehley had always been more than a guitarist. He had become an icon. His music, his image, and his legacy would live on forever, even if he was no longer here to carry the flame. As the funeral service came to a close, Gene Simmons left the building without speaking to reporters, leaving only a short message on his personal social media. "Goodbye, Spaceman." The words quickly became iconic, appearing on tributes, publications, and even merchandise designed to remember Ace. Fans everywhere embraced the phrase, using it as a way to honor him in their own small ways. It was as though Ace had not just left behind music, but a symbol that transcended time, a piece of him that would never truly disappear. But a legacy does not end with a burial. Ace Frehley's influence continued long after that day. His music would never stop being played. The spaceman would always live on in the hearts of those who heard him first on the radio, saw him play live, and learned to play guitar because of him. His contributions to music and rock culture were too great to be forgotten. While his funeral marked the end of an era, it also marked the beginning of something else. An ongoing tribute that would live in every guitar solo, every fan's story, and every new generation of musicians who were inspired by the spaceman who never truly left the stage. You can replace a costume, never the soul that wore it. The legacy of Ace Frehley is not just in the music he made, but in the sound he created and the freedom he represented. His influence on rock music and guitar culture cannot be overstated. Ace's distinct guitar style, raw, emotional, and full of attitude, left a mark on generations of musicians who followed. He didn't just play notes, he played from his heart, making every chord and every solo feel alive. Young guitarists, both past and present, have looked to Ace as a model for creative freedom. His unpredictable, yet perfectly tuned, style helped shape the way many approached rock guitar, encouraging them to focus on feeling, expression, and individuality rather than technical perfection. Ace's solos became iconic because they were not about speed or precision. They were about raw emotion and unique phrasing that made every note sing. Ace Frehley was more than just a guitarist. He was a force that shaped an entire era of music. His iconic Spaceman persona, which he created early on, became a symbol not just for Kiss, but for the entire world of rock and roll. The face paint, the silver boots, the flying V guitar, it all became part of rock's cultural fabric. Fans and fellow musicians alike admired Ace not only for his talent, but for the way he embraced being different. In an era where so many bands and artists were trying to fit a mold, Ace stood out by rejecting any idea of conformity. He made it clear that being yourself loud, bold, and true to your art was the only way to truly succeed. Ace's influence reached beyond the music world. He became a cultural symbol of freedom and rebellion, traits that have long been associated with rock music. His image, from the spaceman makeup to the flashy stage presence, became a blueprint for those who wanted to break away from tradition and make a statement. He inspired countless young artists who wanted to create, not just perform. His blend of chaos and creativity set the tone for the future of hard rock, glam, and even the early days of metal. Guitarists who came after him, from Eddie Van Halen to Dave Grohl, have admitted to being inspired by Ace's ability to blend technical skill with showmanship, to use the guitar as both an instrument and a statement of self-expression. But Ace's legacy is also rooted in the foundation he laid for future generations. His role in Kiss helped create a musical environment where youth, culture, and rock music could collide. Fans didn't just admire the music, they admired the entire experience, one that included not just the songs, but the personas, the visual elements, and the energy of a live show. Kiss, and Ace in particular, taught young people around the world that they didn't need to follow the rules of the music industry to succeed. They could make their own way, create their own identity, and still change the world. The way Ace played his guitar, the way he moved on stage, even the way he interacted with the crowd, gave young rock fans a sense of belonging, an understanding that they, too, could make their mark in the world. Over the years, Ace's music and image have continued to inspire. His role as a cultural icon never faded. Fans who were too young to see him live in his prime grew up listening to Kiss's music, learning about Ace, and keeping his memory alive through new interpretations of his work. Musicians, filmmakers, and even graphic artists found themselves looking back to Ace's iconic visual style for inspiration. The Spaceman, as both a character and a symbol, remained part of the broader conversation in music and pop culture. But while his influence was undeniable, only one question remains. How far could Ace have gone if the world had let him follow his own path without the weight of the Kiss machine holding him back? Would his creativity have taken him into even deeper, more experimental territory? Or was he always destined to live his life between the stage lights and shadows? The true depth of Ace Frehley's legacy will never fully be realized, because we can only wonder about the music he might have created had he lived longer to do so. One thing, however, is certain: Ace will never be forgotten. His guitar, his soul, and the spirit of the Spaceman will always echo in the music of those who continue to push boundaries and live without fear. Some stars fade, others become constellations. Ace Frehley was one of Axino, those stars, a legend whose light continues to shine brightly, even though he is no longer here. The Spaceman, that iconic figure who graced stages with silver boots and a glowing guitar, has become more than just a memory. He has become a symbol, a constant presence in the world of rock and roll that will never truly disappear. His influence echoes not only in the music he created, but in the lives of those who were touched by his sound and spirit. Every time a guitar strums, every time a fan wears silver face paint, the spaceman's legacy lives on. On stage, he wasn't just playing songs, he was creating moments. The smoke that poured from his guitar, the flashing lights, the roar of the crowd, they weren't just part of a performance. They were part of something larger, something magical that Ace himself built. The spaceman was more than a character. He was a reflection of Ace's own journey, bold, unpredictable, and full of passion. With every note he played, Ace became part of the music, and that music will never die. In the years since his passing, the world has moved on, but Ace's presence still lingers. His music is still played on the radio, his songs are still covered by new generations of musicians, and his persona is still celebrated by fans around the world. The spaceman is not just a part of the past, he's woven into the very fabric of rock history, and that thread will never unravel. His guitar still rings in the hearts of those who understood the magic he brought to music, a magic that transcended the stage, the makeup, and the flashing lights. As the years go by, people will continue to remember Ace not just for his hits, but for the way he changed music, for the way he showed everyone that being true to yourself and following your passion could take you farther than you ever imagined. His legacy is more than just fame. It's the inspiration he gave to dreamers, musicians, and fans. It's the belief that even in a world full of noise, you can still find your voice. Some say the spaceman is gone, but listen closely. The sky is still humming.